Okay, hello everybody. Getting started a little bit late due to some technical challenges here. Let me go back. And so anyway, this is I'm Nils Davis. I'm the host of this video, and I wanted to share with you some ideas that I've been having about storytelling. So I've been talking a lot about storytelling over the past few months on this video, the live videos, also on the podcast that I do, and I have some blog posts and all these different things about storytelling and whatnot. And one of the things that happened recently to me is I came across this. I came across this notes about 7 elements of good storytelling. Let me turn that camera back on. So I was thinking, I have this very simple structure of storytelling. I'll talk about it in a second. That is much simpler than most of the descriptions you see about how to tell a story. And I thought, well, why is that? And so I did a little bit of Googling, and I found some good examples of sort of complicated story structures. And so here's one: the 7 elements of good storytelling: a central premise, strong three-dimensional characters who change over time, a confined space, or protagonist who's on some sort of a quest, an antagonist, an arch, a story arch, and of course a conflict. So I thought, well, that all makes sense, but what? How does that map to the very simple story structure that I've been teaching you about, which is this? I have this very simple story structure. I've been really talking about it in the context of the stories that we tell as product managers. And so how can my story structure be so simple if other people are giving you these big complicated things? And I would even say that the 7 pieces that are mentioned in the previous thing, there's a piece missing even, I would say, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the point is, I talk about this thing where there's the beginning of the story, and it's really about a problem. It's about a problem that our customer is having, and how bad the problem is for them, and the challenges it's causing them, both from a business standpoint and from a personal standpoint. And then I say, let's talk about then the solution that the customer went on a search for. So the customer tried a bunch of different solutions. A bunch of them didn't work until they found our product, and then our product solved the problem. And then as a result of that, all these good things happened. The business results were much better, the personal results were much better, and so on. So it's a very simple structure: problem, solution, results. And it makes a good story. I think there's no question that if you tell your story in this way, it'll be very good, as long as you make sure to flesh it out with all the things like what was the business, how was this problem impacting the business, how was this problem impacting the personal experience and personal goals of the person, and so on and so forth. So this is the structure that I talk about. So how does this jibe with the structure of this, like the 7 points that a story is supposed to have, or any of the other kind of ideas about how to tell stories? It's all seem to be more complicated than problem, solution, results. And the reason this simple structure works is that the stories that we tell as product managers, in particular the customer success story, are pretty simple, and they have a lot of constraints. So let's map the constraints to these 7 things. So among the first of the 7 things is this premise. What is the premise that we have for these customer success stories? Well, the premise is that the customer's business needs to be better, that there's some problem. So I should just quickly say, of course, I'm coming from the standpoint of a enterprise software product manager. So my customers are enterprise software people, and they have business problems. So my customers are businesses and the users within that business. And so in my case, it's always a business that's having a problem, and that problem is causing things to go wrong for the business. It's causing things to go wrong for individual people to not be able to achieve their goals, and so on. So if you happen to have an online dog training business, then the central premise is a little different. The central premise is we want well-behaved dogs. That's our scope. That's our world. And we have problems like we have dogs that bite people or that run away or whatever it is. And so that's going to be the central premise. We want dogs that behave and that don't run away and don't bite people. Now, I'm going to go back to the business software example because I don't know that much about online dog training videos, except that I think that's an awesome idea. So then we need strong three-dimensional characters. Well, who are those characters? There are customers. And in the case, if we're talking about a prospect, they might be our prospects. But remember how I talked about we need to talk in the problem, we need to talk about the business results that we're not meeting. Well, we also need to talk about the personal goals that aren't being met. And what is the effect of talking about the personal goals that aren't being met because of this problem? The effect is to create a three-dimensional character. In other words, a character who's not just interested in the numbers, oh, I want sales to improve by 10%, but a character who has other things going on in their life. They're three-dimensional. They have feelings and needs and desires, and they're upset about things. And that's what makes those characters three-dimensional. And that's why one of the big reasons that you use those components of the story, I mean, they're emotionally engaging. The reason they're emotionally engaging is that they make the characters three-dimensional. Okay, so that's that component. So we have that. That's part of our story. What about the confined space? Well, the confined space is really the business. We're not going to go out. We're not going to range outside the business when we talk about this story. It's all about the business. I'm not going to talk about, what somebody did on their weekend or their vacation, unless it was they were still involved in the business because the problem was so bad they didn't get to take a vacation. But I'm not going to talk about, I decided to not worry about the problem for a week and go on vacation to Italy. That's just not part of my story. It would be dumb to put that into my story. It would make it not a good story, not only in the context of a customer success story, but in the context of these 7 rules of good storytelling. So what about the protagonist? Well, again, this is going to be the customer. So there's these three-dimensional characters. The main three-dimensional character in our stories is the customer, the person that's having this problem, the person that's tried to find the solutions, the person that eventually found our solution. That's who the protagonist is. And what about the antagonist? Well, this is interesting. One of the differences between a customer success story and maybe a novel or a spy thriller is that the antagonist is really this risk of the business failing. So you can think about it, again, as the problem. The antagonist is really the problem in our stories. There's not another person. Even if there's a competitor who's like nipping at the heels of the customer, that's not exactly the antagonist. They're not causing the problem. They're just a symptom of the fact that we have a problem. And oftentimes if you do get a good business solution, then you start to beat the competitors instead of losing to them. But that's a result of solving the problem. It's not really an antagonist kind of relationship. So the antagonist, again, that's another way that our story structure is very simplified, is that the antagonist is also the problem. So what about the arch and everything? Well, we already talked about that. We have this problem. There's some activity that goes on to try to find a solution, and eventually a solution is found, and then there's the results. And that's really the arch of our story. And then, of course, the conflict, again, is the problem. So we have the problem that sort of fits a couple of these categories. We have the customer that fits a couple of these categories. And we don't really talk about the solution, but the solution is actually part of the activity that the customer goes through. So I would say that there's actually a couple things missing from this description of the 7 components of a story, that there maybe need to be 9 components. One of the things that's missing is that journey, the transformational journey. Now, it says number 4, the protagonist is on some sort of a quest, but the fact is that we have to have this journey in order to be able to have a decent story. And that's really where the solution comes in, is that's that journey to find a solution to the problem and all the different things that you tried and the obstacles along that path. So that's a missing. I think that should be listed here. The other thing is many stories, not every story, but many stories have a guide or a mentor or some kind of somebody that helps the protagonist find the solution or execute the solution. And in our customer success stories, that is us. That's the role that we play in these stories. We're not the hero. Our company, our software, is not the hero. We are the guide that helps the protagonist find the solution, because this has got to be all about the protagonist. It's got to be about that person who had a problem and had fantastic results as a result of following the leadership that we provided to get them to a solution. So if you think about one of the purposes of a customer success story is for a prospect to read the story and to say, oh, I see myself in that story. Well, what do you want them to see themselves as? Well, for one thing, they want to see themselves, or we want them to see themselves as the protagonist. We want to see them fitting into this story and saying, oh, I could be that person, or I am like that person because I have that problem too. And I've tried some of those solutions that didn't work, and they didn't work for me either. So there's this sense of identity that you want to build between the protagonist and the prospect. And then, of course, there's this guide that comes in, and that's us with our solution, and we help the protagonist get past that problem and beat down all those obstacles. And then the protagonist has these great results. Their business becomes better. They have personal results that are great, and so on. And so that's really what you want to have happen there. So that's I would say there's really 9 elements that should be considered in good storytelling. And again, our basic story structure covers those either implicitly or explicitly with the problem, solution, results component. So let me just summarize what I said here. We have a very simple structure, problem, solution, results, but it's really good enough for customer stories as long as you do a good job of fleshing out each of those components, making the picture of the customer rounded and three-dimensional, meaning it's not just about business problems and being able to achieve 10% sales growth, but it's also about achieving personal goals and showing that the protagonist of the story is a person that has needs and desires and emotions and things like that. The solution is that path that they take, and you want to map out how the path has obstacles, and the obstacles were overcome, and they were overcome with the aid of us as the guide. And then the results are that the things that were problems for the protagonist initially, by the end of the story, they've all been turned around. So you did achieve the 10% sales growth, but you also achieved getting to go home to see your kid's baseball game. And you also achieved getting a promotion, whatever the specific achievements will be. And so the basic point is that this is all the framework you need for customer success stories. So that's the thing I want to take away. I just wanted to sort of explain how complicated story guidance, you can really just boil it down to these 3 key things. And as long as you do a good job on those 3 things, you will end up with a good customer story, and you don't need to worry about all that other stuff and make sure you're matching it, because you really are. Okay, so let's finish that up. Obviously, I am Nils Davis. I've already talked about that. I'm the author of this book. You can buy the book. There's a link down below. It doesn't have anything about storytelling, but it has a lot about other things related to go-to-market. So you might find that useful, as well as all the other things that we do as product managers. You can follow me on Twitter. I have a blog. I have a podcast that I do every week. I do this live video every week. I do it on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. And then I have the podcast, which comes out on Friday mornings. And sometimes it's similar content, and sometimes it's different, and you never know what it's going to be. Obviously, here's the YouTube channel, the link to that. All of these links, of course, are down in the show notes. If you did like this video, if you found it useful, if you found it interesting, consider sharing it with other people who might also find it useful or interesting. If you liked it, you can click the like button, and that tells me that you liked it. And you can subscribe to the channel, which is actually, there's also a link down below that lets you subscribe with one click. So you don't even have to do anything. It just, you click on it and you're subscribed. It's pretty awesome. Of course, there's also a subscribe button, so you can just click on that. I don't know why you would use the link. There's a button. Use the button. That's probably easiest. There's a lot of additional resources, as I mentioned, down below. And I would love to get your comments and feedback on this idea, on ideas for future videos, on comments on old videos, whatever you might want to comment upon. Just tell me how things are going. All that would be awesome. Anyway, that's it for me and for tonight. I'll see you all next week. And until then, this is Nils Davis signing off. Bye-bye.